Thanks so much for checking us out. Do hit the like and subscribe button. It does help us out a lot. Anyway, I want to do a video comparing two sort of titans in the industry when it comes to doing LS swaps in Porsches. That's Chavis Performance Engineering and Renegade Hybrids. I'm going to compare both brands, look at the products that they have to offer, go with a bit of a conclusion after comparing both brands. And I am going to end the video letting you know which vendor I did choose to go with for my particular swap. This video is not sponsored in any way by either brand. It is just an honest comparison letting you know why I went the way I went to go. Please do your research, choose which way you want to go. Anyway, let's get started. First up is Chavis Performance Engineering. They've been in business for over a decade now, and their website reflects their years of expertise. It's sleek, professional, and easy to navigate. There's a nice balance of text and images, giving you just the right amount of information without feeling overwhelmed. On the other hand, we have Renegade Hybrids. This team has been around for over 35 years, and their legacy is quite evident on their website. It's a bit more retro style, but it's still highly functional and packed with lots of useful information. They've clearly put a lot of effort into showcasing their products and the history of their company. The thing for me is I felt it was a bit hard to navigate for what I needed to purchase. They have multiple kit options and it wasn't very clear which I needed and which I did not. So in terms of website style, Chavis gives you a modern, streamlined look, while Renegade has a classic, information-rich layout. It's really down to a personal preference. Now let's talk about the price of their products. Chavis Performance Engineering offers a range of products and their prices vary on the complexity of the part and the vehicle it's designed for. For instance, their swap components can range from $1,000 and up to $4,000 or $5,000, depending on the specifications. Renegade Hybrids, on the other hand, is known for their engine conversion kits. They offer a variety of kits and prices can range from $5,000 for a basic kit up to $25,000 for a fully comprehensive kit. In terms of pricing, both companies offer products that are competitive within the market. It's important to remember, however, that these are performance-enhancing components and conversion kits, so prices reflect the quality and engineering expertise that goes into these products. In either case, it would be great if they just had an option where you could put your year, make, model of your car, what options you were looking for, and it would give you a pre-built kit that you could just purchase. That didn't exist, but that's okay. Lastly, let's talk about how long both companies have been in business. Chavis Performance Engineering, as we said before, has been in business for 10 years, and they've already made a statement in terms of their ability to focus on innovation and great design. Renegade Hybrids, however, has been in the game for over 35 years. They've carved out a niche for themselves with their Porsche engine conversion kits, and they've developed a loyal following among Porsche enthusiasts worldwide. In conclusion, both Chavis Performance Engineering and Renegade Hybrids have their own unique value propositions. If you're looking for somebody who's a little bit more focused on innovative products and a sleek design, then Chavis may be the way to go. If you're looking for somebody who's been around for a long time, has a big community following, and you're thinking about going with more experience, then perhaps Renegade Hybrids is the one that you should go with. In either case, it is really on you to do your own research and see which brand you feel the most comfortable with. Before we end this video, I do want to say which brand I decided to go with, and I decided to go with Chavis Performance Engineering. While both companies offer exceptional products, I was particularly drawn to Chavis because of their innovative design philosophy and forward-thinking approach to performance enhancement. When I was looking to upgrade my car, I was looking for something that was easy to use in terms of the website experience, but also something that offered innovative products and as plug and play as possible. And for me, Chavis really stood out in that regard. I'm in the process of doing the swap from Chavis, but so far the attention to detail and the quality of the components confirmed that I made the right choice for me. Chavis's customer support was also top-notch. I asked the craziest, stupidest questions you could probably think of when it comes to doing the swap, and they were super responsive and really accommodating on all my queries. So that played a big role in my decision. But finally, also what did play a role was the website. The fact that it was easy to use, nicely designed, I could get the information I want, it did really help me in that purchasing decision. So for the reason of the innovative products, the customer support, and the buying experience, it just felt like that was the brand I decided to go with. Now, both Chavez Performance Engineering and Renegade Hybrids are great companies. They make high quality products, they've been around for a while, they have success. So either way, you just have to decide which brand feels right for you. Do your research, figure out which one you like to go with. Personally, I chose Chavez, but if you want to go with Renegade, go with Renegade. Like I said, they're both great companies. But that's it, folks. Thanks so much for looking at my comparison and the reason why I went with Chavez on my swap. Do tune in again as we keep progress on this project and other projects like the 32 in the shop. Like, subscribe, it helps out a lot with me. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one. And safe driving. So one of the upgrades we're going to do is we're going to actually install a third radiator kit. It's not necessarily required, but it's always nice to have the additional cooling. It's not like LSs are known to run hot, but if you are going to do any sort of spirited driving or track driving, they usually recommend doing the third radiator. I'm just doing it because, you know what, I have to pull the whole cooling system apart anyway to do the swap, so I'm going to have to drain all the coolant, refill it, and it is a pressure fill kind of situation, so I'll go through that when I get to it. But seeing as I'm knocking it all apart anyway, now's a great time to do it. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be installing the grates for the intakes. So a common problem with Porsche, and it was the same in my old 996, is these things suck leaves and every other bit you can think of, and it does cause clogging on your radiators regardless. So while I got the bumper off doing that, I'm also going to be putting the grills on there so we can keep all the leaves and dirt and grime out, and I will do a whole clean on all the radiators so they're as efficient as possible. So you can follow me along. I'm going to tear all the headlights out, take the bumper off, and go from there. It is pretty much a bolt-in kit that you can get. I'm getting my kit through Pelican just because I got a discount through being a Porsche Club of America member. Not sponsored by Pelican. There are other vendors, Suncoast, or you can go to your local Porsche dealer. It is a Porsche part. And the grills are going to be Redlines. I'll put all the links in the description down below in the video, so if you want to get what I got in the same place, you can, or you can search for your partner somewhere else. Anyways, let's get going.
tutorial on how I clean the block just to get the carbon off of the pistons and the mounting surfaces. So you can kind of see my after. It's all nice and clean. That's on the one side. And this is the other side I have yet to do. So yeah, I'm just gonna go through the whole process. What I'm gonna do is I'll show you how to do it in one cylinder in real time, and then I'll speed it up so you can just see the rest of it. Should take about an hour. That's how long it took me on the other side. So here we go. So yeah, this process is pretty straightforward actually. You're gonna need some WD-40. I do it in a spray bottle so it just doesn't shoot really hard with the aerosol. So that's the main cleaner you're gonna use is WD-40. Scotch-Brite pads, just get the Scotch-Brite pads, cut them in half. I use one per cylinder, so you keep changing them. And then last but not least is a little scraper that I use on the surfaces. So that's about the extent of the whole project. There's one more tool you're gonna need. There. Just something to turn the flywheel. So what I like to do is I don't want to do too much of the cylinder. So we just want to try and get the top part where we see the carbon buildup and then up to the piston. Let's just start on the first one. So first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to wipe it out with the blue rag. Get as much gunk out of here as I can. There's no sense scratching the heck out of the cylinders, moving things around. So I'm just going to get some of that out of here. And that's of course the other thing you're going to need is some blue rags to just keep wiping all this junk out. There's a bunch of it. All right, so let's just crank it over. Get the first piston close to the top. Seeing a bunch of gunk in one of the cylinders, so I don't want to keep rotating through all that. Okay. Right there is going to work. Cool. So this is just an exercise in elbow grease. So you just want to spray it down really well. I spray them all down anyway. Keeps all the gunk off. And we're good to start. Just did a wee quick reposition of the camera. Let's go. So you don't want to do too crazy with your pressure because you're not trying to mar the cylinder walls or the pistons or anything, and you don't have to use a lot of pressure. This is just one of those things where you just take your time and bit of elbow grease, and she'll start to come already. You can start to see how it's all getting dark. That's the carbon breaking off. One trick, I like to keep everything with lots of WD-40 on it anyway, just to keep the moisture out of the cylinders when everything's all broken apart. But to make your life a little easier, you can spray a bunch of WD-40 on your cylinders and then let it soak overnight. And that'll help to break it down. You don't want to get it dry, so as it starts to dry out from just scrubbing, spray a little more on. If you get lots of dirt and gunk in the bottom, which is kind of what I'm getting a little bit now, you just wipe her down. So just take that, put it there. And you can already see it starting to clean up pretty quick. What was that, 2 minutes? Cool, so keep going. More spray. More elbow grease. If your pad starts not being as effective or starts getting really dirty, just keep moving it around to the new spot. Like I said, I like you could probably do 2 cylinders with one pad, but I don't know, it's not that expensive. I just prefer to change the pads per cylinder, so that kind of gives you an idea of how much real estate you've got on the pad to use. One thing you'll see me do later on is, as I rotate the assembly to do the other pistons, is I go back and I wipe the cylinder walls as the piston is going down. And that's because when you're doing this, some of it will get past the rings a little bit, and you will see some particles in the cylinder wall. And you obviously don't want to be starting the engine like that, so I take the time to wipe it lots and lots and lots and lots of times until I see absolutely nothing in the cylinder walls. And even after, when you see me do the time lapse, I will rotate the assembly multiple times, spraying it down with WD-40, wiping it with a blue towel over and over and over and over and over again until I see everything is out. Then I like to rotate the engine on its side and then spray it from the back side as well. I just want to get every little piece of particle and everything out of there as I possibly can. All right, let's wipe it down. See, there's tons left on that. I barely even really used a lot of it. So you could effectively get 2 per pad probably, but the other thing you'll notice on this car is it's displacement on demand. So what you'll get with that when it's displacement on demand is the cylinders that are the ones that don't run all the time will have a lot less carbon buildup. So those ones will go probably a lot faster for you. They did for me. They're just obviously not ran full time, only when the person put their foot to the floor. So kind of makes sense. They got less miles on them, so they get less carbon buildup. But the other ones that are running all the time, you'll see it. So you don't have to get all the discoloration off. It will come if you spend some time on it. You're just really trying to get the carbon off. There you go. That was probably, I'll check the time, but I bet you that was 5 minutes. And just like that, you've got a really nice clean piston, no carbon, nothing on the edge of the cylinder. She's ready to run again for another 100,000 miles or whatever you got. Now, surface. So what I do for the surface, for the mating surface, gotta pull that guide out. Although you could probably do it with it in, but why? So it comes out like that. And look at that, there you go. Okay, so what I do for the surface is I use this little scraper, like that. Now, the thing with a scraper like this is you're not trying to gouge the surface, obviously. So next to no pressure, you're just using it as basically a straight edge to help you get all this gasket material off. Same thing, lots of WD-40, and this is just definitely a patience game. You do not want to mar surfaces. You're not trying to make things so they're not nice and flush anymore. You're just trying to take your time and get the old gunk and gasket material off. It really doesn't matter how you want to do this. You'll see I use lots of WD-40 all the time just for a lubricant so I don't mar the surfaces. You could just do all your mating surfaces first and then go back and do your cylinders, or you can do one at a time or whatever you want. What I'm probably going to do from here is I'm just going to get it done for this one cylinder so you can sort of see a clean side of everything, is what I did. And then I'm going to switch to a faster version of the video just to show you the rest of the process. You can see the before and after. And how I'm probably going to do it when I go to the time lapse is I am going to clean the entire surface here first, and then I'm going to go after the cylinders individually. Just because I don't want to switch tools back and forth, again, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you're going to clean off everything anyway, but whatever. However you like to roll, just get it cleaned. This is not a performance issue. Well, I guess one could argue it is, but it's not a performance issue so much as it is, this is for your mating surfaces, so you get proper sealing for your water jackets and everything else for your cylinder heads. So it's got to be nice and clean. You don't want to have any gunk in there to prevent a good seal, obviously. Whereas the carbon buildup is definitely more of a performance issue. You will get hot spotting on your cylinders where there is carbon. It does impact performance. You want to get it all off of your cylinder heads as well, which I'm going to do another video on the process of how I'm cleaning my cylinder heads and my lifters and everything to get all the carbon buildup off of that. Now, one also could argue, of course, why not just rebuild the motor at this point in time? Just knock it all apart, right? Then you can hot tank it, you get all this junk off in one shot, blah, blah, blah. Simply put, the reason why I didn't do it is a cost. Now, depending on where you're at and when you watch this video, it's 2023, and we all know what happened with COVID stuff and inflation, and unfortunately, the cost of machine shops are way, way, way up there. Now, I'm not dissing machine shops. Don't take it like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the labor costs are a lot higher than they used to be, and you really got to consider how far you go with it. Now, there was an availability issue for crate motors for a long ass time because of COVID, and you couldn't get your hands on one, so you were kind of stuck going the used route. That has been changing. You can get LS3 crate motors again, and I know that from talking to somebody that works at a GM dealership, and they have inventory, so you could just go get a new motor. So depending on what your costs are for getting a used motor, once you factor in parts and labor, it may not make sense. Now, that should drive the used prices back down again, but the demand's still high, they're still up there. So, just have to do your own kind of cost-benefit analysis. Now, when you rebuild a motor, you can build it to your spec. So this is going in a Porsche, and depending on how you want to go with a Porsche project, you may want to create a really high revving motor so it's more close to the Porsche kind of specs instead of, what's this guy at, 6,600 RPM, and Porsche's 7,200 stock, so you may want to have something that revs a little higher, right? You may want to go turbos, all that kind of fun stuff, so you're going to change what you do for your internals to match that for your induction system. So fair enough. A crate motor from GM, say a brand new LS3 or something, isn't going to necessarily match that. So that's a fair enough. But for me, I'm taking a slightly budget approach to get it on the road because there is a cost in all of the stuff to get it swapped. So I'm going to do, there will be another video on the vendor I chose for my swap and why. But regardless, there are two sort of main players in the space. And it doesn't really matter which one you choose. they are costly to get all of the mounting components and the electrical components, etc. Now I'm sure there's probably a way you could save some money by doing some of the electrical yourself, but my goal with this is to get this car back on the road this summer, which we are in late spring, so summer is a-coming, and I'm trying to get faster. So I'm using a lot of the plug-and-play stuff. I don't feel like building my own wiring harnesses and everything else, which is fine. That's my choice. But the point is, it's not free by any stretch of the imagination, and so you have to factor that in when you're doing your builds. Now, when a car like this is swapped to an LS swap, if in the future I decide I want to go LS3 or LS whatever the heck I want to do, I can just take it out and I can swap the motor for any other LS. It's all set up for it already. Change the tune and Bob's your uncle, just like any other swap into a Corvette or whatever the heck you want to do. So that's just the way I took it. So because of that, I'm doing what's more commonly known as a refresh. I'm just cleaning up all the carbon off, all the meeting surfaces, getting all nice and clean, a little bit of a cam upgrade, and that's that. Anyway, sidebar over through all that whole thing. You should have seen we got a nice clean mating surface. You could go over this with a Scotch-Brite if you want, just to get even cleaner. But that, my friends, is looking pretty good from there. Okay, cool. I'm gonna switch to a time-lapse video and all this junk out of here. Like I said, the junk gets everywhere, so you want to make sure it's not going up and down when you move the pistons all the time. So just wipe, clean, new rag, keep it going. You're gonna get junk literally everywhere. So I need to wash out this whole side. I did it with the other side already. Got all the junk out of all the different valleys and bits. Anyway, time lapse. That could be used again. Do what you want to do. I got one per cylinder, and that's just how I roll. Cool.
quick video. I wanted to show that we got the engine all back together, which was awesome. A few things I want to talk about on this one. So the harness from Chavis Performance Engineering is awesome. It is totally plug and play. You just click everything where it's supposed to go. Everything is completely labeled, which makes it great. And you end up with the plugins for the GM computer and the Porsche connection, and then there's a connection that you have to take off the harness to finish this one, and then a few relays. So really awesome setup. There is also a kit that goes inside the car, connects to the factory Porsche connections, and gives you an ODB2 connection to tune the motor with. So really cool, highly recommend that. That was a great way to go. Few points of note though, I did want to talk about. I went with an L76, which is like an LS2 with LS3 heads out of a 2009 Pontiac G8. There were a few gotchas, so Chavis is pretty much set up mainly for a 997 with an LS3 Camaro engine. So some things I ran into that I had to change. The oil pressure switch is not going to work. You have to get a Camaro oil pressure switch. Threads into the same hole, no problem, but the port on the harness is made for that. The starter, it does have to use the Camaro starter. It uses a plug-in kind of harness style. The older LS2 has just your kind of old school kind of nut bolt kind of situation. So that had to happen there. The Moroso oil pan that's used in the kit, it does have a bung that's been added on for an oil temperature readout. That uses the coolant temperature sensor again from a Camaro, so you have to get one of those. But beyond that, everything else was fine. So coils and injectors all plugged in, the water temperature plugged in, no problem. The alternator that I had on my L76 we reused again, that plugged in no problem. So all those things were great. The other thing was the air conditioning compressor. The air conditioning compressor and bracket have to come from a Corvette. So I think it's 2006 to 2012, if I remember correctly, Corvette. So it's a certain type of bracket and a compressor. Chavis does actually make brackets, so the brackets are actually hard to come by now. I don't know why, but GM seems to be sold out and on back order for whatever. Chavis does make his own brackets now for that, so there's a solution there. But the compressor I had on my L76 wouldn't work, and same with the bracket. It's just in the wrong location. So that had to get swapped out as well. But other than that, everything else is good to go. I am going to run an oil catch can on this. The intake wasn't too bad, but definitely had some oil in it. So I'm going to be running an oil catch can on it. There's a few connections I have to run in terms of the positive crankcase pressure side of things and vacuum to the brake side, but I have all the hoses set up for that, just have to wait till it gets inside the car. We did go with the BBK headers. These are again for a Camaro. What I'm going to be doing with the exhaust is something a little bit different that I haven't seen done anywhere else. So I will be running an X-pipe underneath. So off of here to an X-pipe underneath the oil pan. Then I'm going to be going to some vibrant, ultra-quiet resonators, and then also going to vibrant mufflers before it goes out. Why so much exhaust? Where I live, the police are highly sensitive to noise. This is not a stock car. I don't want to get into a situation where I get repair tickets and have to deal with that nonsense. So I do want to mellow it out. I'd love to just go with resonators, but I think with the additional mufflers on top of there, it'd be a good idea. The X-pipe, it's going to help with not making it sound so much like a V8. I think it will just improve the exhaust notes so it's a little bit better. I did think about going with 180-degree headers, but I decided against it. Just the cost factor was too high. I can always swap them out later for 180-degree if I want to go that way. But I think it should sound good, should perform good. As you might see in the background, I do have everything off. So I've got the bumper off and all the heat shields off, ready to go. And I'm going to start pulling the motor here pretty soon. I'll do a video on that. And then we'll start matting up the transmission and everything else to it and getting ready to do the swap. There are a few parts I'm waiting on to come in. They should be coming in the next few days. So that's kind of why I'm just in a bit of a holding pattern. And then we're going to get started. So yeah, just a little quick update, let you know what happened, a few little gotchas that I ran into, nothing major, and looking forward to doing the swap. So take it easy, drive safe. Hey, how's it going? I know I haven't done a video in a while. Actually, it's just because I've been waiting for parts, to be honest. Everybody's hit by the same supplier delays and stuff, so I don't want to get into that, but it is what it is. Luckily, yesterday I had a whole bunch of stuff show up at the same time. I just wanted to do a video on the installation of the clutch. I did some, YouTube searching, seeing if there's any content out there about installing a clutch, but there really wasn't a lot of details. I kind of had to poke through forums and stuff. Installing a clutch is pretty straightforward, don't get me wrong, but I always confirm everything 2, 3, 4 times sometimes just to make sure I'm 100% exactly how it goes. And when I find it a little bit difficult to find information, I figured why not do a video on it. But anywho, I'm just going to briefly go over where we're at in the project on the LS swap, and then I'm going to do the clutch installation, which should work with any Porsche, by the way. It doesn't matter if I'm doing an LS. It's actually a Porsche clutch that's going into it. But we've installed the adapter plate from Chavez Performance Engineering, or CPE. So that went on there pretty straightforward, bolts right on, has all the specs on what to do for torque, etc. Has some studs that you install for marrying up to the transmission. And then there's a spec flywheel that goes in place. The flywheel has to be installed first, of course, because it goes in behind the mounting plate. But then after that, you can install the clutch whenever. So I didn't have my clutch, I was waiting on it, so I decided to get this far, and then I've just kind of been on hold. So let's go over what I'm going to use. I am going with a spec clutch. This is a spec flywheel. That's what CPE uses. It all marries together, so that's fine. Maybe you can use a different clutch.
Regardless, it shouldn't really matter what brand of clutch you're doing. A clutch is a clutch, so this should help you if you're doing a clutch installation. So with spec, you get a few pieces. And one piece I don't need specifically, but I'm going to show it. So first off, you get a bearing. This is for where the transmission goes inside of here, and you can actually change this bearing. I don't need it because the bearing comes installed in the flywheel that I have, but it does come with the bearing. The other one it does come with is a throwout bearing. So this actually installs into the transmission here. And there's just a couple clips that just goes into. I don't know if you can see on there, but on each side of the square, there's just these two little clips. So it just clips into place and the other one clips out. I'm not going to go over the throwout bearing installation in this video. I'm just going to focus in on the clutch, but if you're curious what that is, that's what that is. You actually get the fiber disc clutch. I went with a Spec 1 clutch. The reason is this engine's going to be lucky to make 430 horse. And that's what this is rated for. I have used higher spec clutches before. The thing is that when you get into the really high performance clutches, it does dramatically change the driving experience. And unless you're actually going to go like twin turbo or something like that with a lot of horsepower and torque, you're putting too much clutch in there than you need, and it just ruins the driving experience. And I'm looking to keep this more of a daily cruiser. So this one is rated for 430 horse. This engine will not get the 430 horse for what we're doing, so we're good to go. You will notice that there is two stickers. One says trans side, so that's where the transmission is obviously at, and the other one says FW side, which is firewall side. So that's the way that it's going to go on. The other thing you get is an alignment tool. So this is to make sure that your clutch is actually aligned properly as you're putting everything together. And then you get, heavy, big pressure plate. The pressure plate has alignment pins. You'll see there's alignment pins on here. And then these bolts came with the flywheel. So these are the bolts that we use to fix to it. Specs from CPE call for 17 foot-pounds or 23 newton meters for torque specs in a crisscross pattern. So let's get to it. Cool. So yeah, that's it. Pretty straightforward. After you get it all in, you can pull out your alignment tool, and that's that. So I just got to install throwout bearing into the transmission, and then I'm ready to marry the transmission. But in terms of a clutch installation video, that's the end of that. The one thing you'll notice is I did put Loctite on the threads. You can or you cannot, I guess. It does have lock washers on there, so I guess you could argue it's not really needed. I know Chavis Performance Engineering, they suggest to Loctite literally everything. It's just some peace of mind, I guess. So anyways, that's on there, and that's the end of the video. So thanks for checking us out. Any questions, hit me up in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one when we put the transmission together. Hey, so I want to do a video on a specific subject which has to do with the engine mount
and what modifications you really should be doing to it to move the engine back 1.5 inches. And I'm going to go over why. It's not required. It is, some people do it, some people don't, but I'm going to say it is required. Anyway, I'm actually going to show all the videos I took along the way as I was thinking it through and came up with different ideas. I'm going to show you what I ended up doing, and I'm also going to add a few notes along the way, and there are a few things I got as gotchas to look out for. So anyway, I hope it helps you out. I would say that if you are going to do an LS swap in a Porsche, that this is a step that is absolutely required to do. So don't skip it. That's just my opinion. Do what you like. Also, in how I did everything, you may decide to go a different way. There are actually a few ways to skin the cat. I am going to talk about that a little bit at the end of all the different options that are out there. But big shout out to everybody on the Swap Porsche community in Facebook. Lots of different ideas came from there, and I took inspiration on how I did it from there. So anyways, huge shout out to everyone in that group. So do check them out if you're going to do it. There's a lot of help and resources there. Anyways, let's get going from the very beginning.
All right, let's talk about the motor cross member brace thingy bobby. So as discovered, if you don't modify the transmission mount, the engine is to the rear. It's doable, but kind of sucks. So people on the forum are helping me out. I thought I'd just post a video for video's sake, and you guys can kind of correct me as I go. Anyway, sounds like these holes here have to be notched out 1.5 inches, which that's a big notch for that one. For both of them, that's a big notch. So that's 1.5 inches on those ones apparently, so that it can go forward. So you got to notch it that way because it's going to go that way. Now the cross brace is the fun one, and here's my theory. My theory is if I flip this left to right, the other way around, will it work that way? I don't know if it's going to support it properly or if it's going to conflict with anything because all the bends are a certain direction. I don't really know. Maybe you guys have an opinion. I'm going to mark the floor with the 2 points, one down here in the stock location, and then one down after I flip it, which is too hard to do when I'm holding the phone. And I'll measure the distance and we'll see if maybe that would be a thing that would work. Okay, so the cross brace isn't there anymore, and the reason is there's this little tab, lock tab that's on there that I just didn't feel like cutting off until I know for sure what I'm doing. But I was able to kind of like hold it with both hands. So if we look at the gap, that's exactly, give or take, 1 inch, 1.25 inches, maybe plus 1/8. So just shy of 1.5 inches. So that actually might work.
Okay, so yeah, first note, you cannot flip the bracket. The way the bracket is designed, it will hit the transmission, so you cannot get it perfectly vertical at all. You'd have to prefabricate the bracket, and if you're going to do all that, you might as well just cut the ears off and do the welding or do whatever else like everybody else has done. So no is the answer on that one. I'll save you the trouble of trying to figure it out yourself.
So one thing you have to do is you have to relocate the mount brackets, and there's a stud that comes out. And so that stud can be moved back to a mount point, which I believe is for the Tiptronic transmission. So let's move that. And just to confirm, the head of that stud is 7 millimeters. So let's move it. Okay, now you can see the studs in the new bracket. You will notice, or the new bolt spot, sorry. You will notice that the hole is narrower. So here's where the debate rages. Looks like Chavis, he says you have to cut the mounting bracket and weld them in the new place. Other people say just grind the hole out a little bit and you're good to go. So I'm gonna mount up the bracket unmodified first and see where things line up. So after a bunch of trial and error, it does work. You can just notch it and it will fit. The other thing I did do is I did shave back a bit of this lip so it's just easier for me to get in and out based on where the transmission kind of was with the LS in it. There's still a bend there, so it still has some strength in it. So anyway, I don't think that's the end of the world.
I think what I'm going to do is the nut has quite a large kind of washer fixed on it, and it does easily cover that area. But I think what I'm going to do is I am going to end up welding a little bit on the outside there, on this side. I'm going to weld a little bit on here just to put a little bit more meat there, so the nut has a little bit more to hold on to. I think that's probably the smarter thing to do, although probably would just be fine like this. I mean, it's the sum of its parts. There's another huge mounting bracket that goes on it as well, so you know, this is just another piece of the pie, but I have it off. Why not? Now, because I'm welding up a piece on there, one would say, why didn't you just cut and weld it? Yeah, fair enough. I mean, maybe that was the better way to go, is just to do the cut and the weld, but honing out some holes was a pretty simplistic way to do it. Cutting this whole thing and lining it all back up again, depending on your fab skills and what you want to do, you make the call, but this is an option that I decided to go with. So I'm just going to do a little bit of weld on here, make that a little bit of a stronger hole, and get the transmission back in. So this thing, so I did a little small notch on the bandsaw because it drops down on the curve here. So now that could just go in like that. I'll put these clips over so it's a bit of a lock, and then you can see how it'll now line up with the furthest edge. Also gives you sort of a spot where you can see where I've got to weld some stuff back in to make it a more solid mount. So yeah, I'm just going to get to the welding part. So I just wanted to do a quick shot of this before I put it back in, but you can see how I did notching. I just drilled a hole where it lined up, then just took a die grinder and grinded it out. It's not the most beautiful job in the world, but you're never really going to see it. But anyways, that's what I did. Now I'm going to try and mount it all.
So another fun thing you'll run into is, because you've moved it back, of course your clearances have changed. And so this throw is going to hit. It doesn't hit now, and apparently it only has to go up a little bit to make the clearance, but I still have to go up another inch and it will hit. So it does have to go up a wee bit. Now, people say they are able to do this in the car altogether. I don't even know how you'd swing a hammer, but I could probably put a punch, or I guess use something on my hammer drill. But yeah, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, so here's another interesting one. Hitting the floor and making some room for the counterweight on the shift linkage is a maybe. So my car, just so you guys know, is a 2008 Carrera C2S, so 997.1. And it is a Canadian original bought and sold car. I'm giving you those details because this is the maybe situation I'm talking about. For some cars, you may have to hit the floor to make clearance for that counterweight. Do not cut the counterweight off. So some people decide to just cut it off. That is not a good idea. I would not do that. If you want to, go ahead, but I would not do that. Other cars, the counterweight will hit the floor and you have to massage it. My car, I didn't. After I got everything bolted up in place, I tried the clearances, and unless you really kind of swing it, it might slightly touch, but that's not even within the shift points on the cable. So it doesn't hit, so I didn't have to do it. I did check in with CPE. They said it depends. Some cars do, some cars don't. So I don't know if it's the year, if it's because it's a C2S, if it's a Canadian, I don't know what the reason is, but you may or may not have to do this part. So anyways, I would just say trial and error, fit it up. If you don't have to do it, don't bother. If you do, drop it down. You're gonna have to get in there with an air chisel or something and kind of knock it up a bit. And it's like probably, you know, 1/8 of an inch. Very, very small clearance you'd have to make with it. So anyways, let's get back at it.
So one other thing to note is the battery cable has this clip that this attaches onto. It's like a metal clamp, and it goes on the cross brace. The thing is, when you move it back, where the cross brace is it will hit this rat hose. So if you don't bend it up out of the way or cut it off, you are going to end up with it rubbing on this rat hose, and you will get a massive coolant leak at some point in the future. So bend it up, and then you can either just relocate this clip or maybe even zap strap that clip up there instead after you kind of line up your battery cables. But be careful that you make sure you do that, or else leaky. Okay, job done with relocating it. Now you can see the brackets here, the blocks are on the front, so it did go back a significant amount because the blocks used to be on this side, the plates used to be on this side. So, you know, it moved the engine back 1.5 inches. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're looking at these clearances, it's tight, and now it's way more serviceable, which is great. So that's what we were kind of going for. Now I've got more clearance for the water pump, and I can probably do a better design on my airbox.
Anyway, yeah, so cool. As you can see with the video, it did make it go back a significant amount. I am planning on designing my own airbox, which will retain all of the sort of factory deck lid without doing any cutting or modification. I want to keep the original one with the power. I don't want to go with a wing, just the style I'm going with. If you're going to go aftermarket deck lid and you're cool just cutting it up, then, you know, go nuts. But I'm going to be designing something completely different, something that looks a little bit more stock and, again, retains all the functionality. So literally every 1/8 of an inch is important for what I'm trying to do for clearances. I wish I had known this before I had started, because I would have done it to begin with. When I originally fit the motor and I was trying to fit the water pump, I did have to do some extra cutting into the support bracket, which I could have used for supporting my airbox. But whatever, live and learn. It's not a tremendous impact to the world, and I just ended up giving myself even more clearance when everything's all done, so it is what it is. But I would say that this is definitely something I would strongly recommend, if not say required, just to give you that extra space, because the space is pretty precious towards the back. Also, you could argue it does allow you to get more center mass and have the engine sticking out less out the back. I know it's only 1.5 inches, but it's 1.5 inches, and that's where the weight is, so it does give you a better center balancing. Some of the things I heard about was, what about axle angles? From my understanding, CPE does this on all their cars. They've had no problems with it before, with track applications and everything else. The axles are made to have some fairly extreme angles, just given the fact of how everything kind of works with the suspension geometry in a rear engine car. So people didn't have a concern there. Some of the other things that people have done have been completely cutting the bracket and re-welding it, re-welding the sides. You know, again, I took the more notched approach. I have a welder, I could have done it that way, but I had the engine in the car already. And to do it properly, I would have wanted to pull the whole thing out again so I could fabricate the bracket properly. I didn't feel I could do a good enough job with the fabrication and get it right. Also, it just felt like cutting the bracket and re-welding it again does potentially impact structural integrity. Of course, if you get good penetration and everything else, you know, it's kind of a moot point. But I decided to try to go with the notch approach, like other people had. It's a simple die grinder. If you don't have a welder, then, you know, maybe that's the way to go for you. You can go the same way. Anyways, it was frustrating to find out. Hopefully this helps you so you do it ahead of time so you don't have that frustration I had. I am glad I did it. So anyways, happy motoring, stay safe. I'll see you on the next one. I'm going to talk about the plumbing for all the hoses I got, which don't have any instructions or anything like that, but I figured out how I'm going to do the hose routing the way I want. So do check that one out when I post it. Anyways, take it easy. Like, subscribe, all those things help. Peace out.
So I was asked the question on YouTube and just one of the comments about how I did the power steering pump. And it is an electric power steering pump. It's not running off the engine. So I did remove all the power steering lines, the factory Porsche ones that went from the back all the way to the rack. So I took that all off. And you come right off the rack, the stock rack, to an electric pump. So let me show you the placement of the kit that Chavez gets with his power steering pump kit. That's the one I used. I'll show you where they put it. I'll show you where I put it, and then some of the routing. And I'm also going to touch on the gas tank venting. You'll see why it kind of plays a role when I get into it. Anyways, let me show you what's going on. I'll tear some stuff apart so you can see what's happening. All right, so first thing first, I'm going to show you with the panels back on what it looks like, but let's just show you what it looks like when it's off. So this is the electric power steering pump installed here. There is a mounting bracket that comes with it, but where Chavis actually installs it is right down here in the corner, actually. So it does mount in this corner and kind of is right here in the middle of your frunk, basically. One of the other guys on the Porsche swapped forum on Facebook showed a different way, and I just basically followed his lead, but I'm just going to go over how I did it. But really kudos goes to him. I didn't like the idea of it sitting here. I felt it takes up trunk space, didn't look good, so I went a different route. One note on that though is you can't use the hoses that come with the Chavis kit because they're too short. They're made to go here in the corner, and I'm moving up here. So you need to go with a 4-foot line. I got one off of eBay that's used for nitrous. I'll put a link in the description. And the bracket that it comes with, you have to do some refabrication. So I think you can kind of see here, there is a bracket kind of mount there, and that's for where the carbon canister goes. So that carbon canister, those mounts right there, the carbon canister or charcoal canister that's there is where the fuel vents into. And so you can use those mount points for the bracket that you're going to use to hold the power steering pump. Now, I did sort of mention, I'm going to take an aside here and talk about a little bit about that. So underneath the bottom, try to see if you can see it. Give me 1 second, I'm going to get a flashlight. All right, sorry about that. I had to grab my flashlight because you could hardly see what the hell's going on here. Yeah, so if you can see under there, you might see there's a black, well, it's kind of a silver. There you go. Kind of. There you go. You can see that rubber grommet that's under there. That's a rubber grommet. It's 80 millimeter I installed there. When you take the carbon canister off, it has these two fittings. You just push there a push button that pop off the carbon canister. And then the canister comes out. It's a bit of a pain in the butt, but the cool thing is the thicker line that's there, what I had done is I tied the thicker line to the thinner line, and the thinner line runs to the back, and I put a fuel vent on the back towards the engine. Unfortunately, when filling up the gas, there was too much back pressure resistance and basically couldn't get any gas in it. So I disconnected that and I ran off of that port there, and try to see any way to see it. You really can't see it. I'm going to put a link to the fitting I used to go into the factory connection. But you run a hose through here, and then it goes to where there is a port there. You can sort of see the hose clamp there at the bottom, and it's into a vent. That's a boat vent that's there, and it's big enough where it doesn't clog the hole, because that hole is intended for water to get in and out. So I'm able to put it there. I'll show a picture. You probably should see it now. So that's what the vent looks like. So it works pretty good. I was able to fill up no problem after doing that. Okay, so why did I mention that? Because you have to make sure that you have enough clearance in your bracket to make sure you can get the hose out, and then you're going to run it through. Now, let's get back to the power steering pump. See, the power steering pump, it's mounted here, and then the electrical goes to the battery. So you got a main power line that goes to the battery. You do have a factory ground point here you can use for ground, so that was good. You can see the braided line, that's my high pressure line that goes in front of the battery here. And then I've got my low pressure line goes behind the battery. They both go over to here. Let's move some panels out of the way. There we go. So they go to here, grab my flashlight. You can see down there, there is a factory grommet. There you go. There you go. Down there's a grommet. That grommet you can go right through. And it does lead down to the power steering rack, and you can just mount it there. So that's pretty much it. Now let me just put some panels back on so you can kind of see what it looks like. So you just take a hole saw, cut a hole. Just gives you a bit of a factory look. I was trying to make it so it was completely flush, but with the height of the pump, you can see getting to a factory fully flush thing wasn't going to work. But so you just stick this on like that, and then there's the connection there. So looks pretty nice and flush. I'll just throw these ones all back on. Where's my other one? So throw this one back on. This is a little trickier to do one-handed, the way that this goes together, but whatever. There you go, sorted. And then throw the battery cover back on. One, two. There you go. Nice and flush, and it works great. Power steering's great. Haven't had any issues with it. Kind of the cool thing is, if you want to move the car around, you just have to turn the key, and you can get power steering to move the car around. You don't have to actually start it. Anyway, yeah, so that's it. Hopefully that helps you out. Hit me up if you have any more questions. Thanks. Yeah, there's one last thing I forgot to mention. There's 3 wires that go to the power steering pump. The 2 thicker wires are power and ground, so those are fairly obvious. But the 3rd wire is like a controller, like a relay. So you connect that to the C6 just with a fuse tap. And the way that you get there is just behind the battery. There's a grommet that faces towards the cabin, and you can push that wire through, and it comes right through above the pedals. You'll have to kind of reach underneath the dash and grab it, but you can feed it through. You can get it right to the fuse panel. So that's the one last wire you have to do. So I forgot to mention that when I was showing it all apart. I've got it all back together. I didn't want to take it apart again. But anyways, I just thought I'd mention it. Anyways, take care. So one thing I really liked that I had in my 996 was sport seats. And when I got the 997 project, I really wanted to try and find some sport seats because it didn't have them. But it did have power and heated, which are pretty cool, if you like power and heated, I guess. So I went on the search, and luckily I did get a set from the salvage guys again. So big props to them for sorting me out, but I got a pair of those bad boys, and they are power and heated, and they're actually called adaptive sport seats. So the adaptive part is in the bolsters on the side, it actually has these airbags that can inflate and deflate so you can get a more rigid support or a softer support. And then of course it's got the full 18-way power, and those are also heated, so that's pretty cool. Now the question is, will they fit in here? Let's find out. All right, so we gotta get these seats out. The best way I find is to move the seats fully forward first, which requires you to have the battery hooked up. The one thing you want to remember is you need to disconnect the battery before unplugging the seats, or you're going to end up throwing yourself an airbag code. And you don't want to hook the battery back up until you've got the replacement seats in the car and hooked up against the electrical. So you see at the back here there's 2 screws here, so we'll take those off. It is a Torx head. And they're pretty good. You can get away with a 10mm socket, but you, especially if it's a 12 point, but you do want to be careful doing that because you don't want to use it for tightening it, or you will definitely risk rounding it out. So get that one out. Now I actually had disconnected the battery just a little while ago, so I could probably use a larger one than the little teeny guy. 1/4-inch drive is probably not the best for this, but it happened to be the one I had set up already for something else. Back one's done. Let me go hook the battery back up. As you can tell, I have it up on the hoist, getting ready for the motor drop. Okay. Now you don't want to go all the way back because it helps them being in the middle for, there we go. And you can see they're on an angle on these bottom ones. That's why you don't have to go all the way back. But it helps to have them in the middle for taking them out. instead of having the seat rails sticking all the way out to one side. So I'll take the battery back off, because after we get the seat pulled, you disconnect the electrical. Now, the reason why I don't have the door all the way open is because I'm on my hoist, and I've got protectors on the door so it doesn't hit this post, but the reason why I don't have it on the ground so I can open the door all the way is because my wheels are at Panther Precision Machine in Surrey getting redone, which I want to do a video on that as well. You can check it out. There's one. There's two. Hopefully this is working in terms of you guys being able to see everything. My first time using one of these head-mounted GoPro deals. Kind of like a live action. But when I'm taking it out, I'm probably going to use a different camera. Alright, there's two of them. A little more I know where they are. Now we should be able to tilt it back and expose money and garbage. Okay, like that. Okay, so to take this plug out, pull it. It's kind of notched, so as you do it, it ends up disconnecting itself. There you go. There's your one power, or your one cable out. It looks like it is that strap locked on there. Does that disengage? Okay. You've got another one. You got to pull the red one on. Get that out. Let's see if we can get her. She's a tricky one, huh? Oh. Was it fully disengaged? There we go. Got her. Okay. I think I can probably take that off with. See, how's it go to the other side? I might break that taking that out. I'd like to keep it so I can use it on the other seat. Let's see. I've got a puller for that. If she breaks, I'll deal with it, I guess. Nope, yeah, that kept on. Looks like I could have pinched it from the back, but there's a wire that goes back here, or a rod for the power I couldn't get to. Okay. Okay. So it's got the okay. On. Okay, where's the other one? No heat. Okay, you may have noticed I took a little break, and the reason was I found this plug and
No pluggy puggy anywhere. What I found out in my Googles is this is for a pressure sensor for the airbags, and that of course is in the other seat but on this one. And now this might affect this passenger airbag on off switch, or it might just never come on, or it might throw a code. I'm going to have to deal with it. So what I'm going to do is that, and I'm going to need that. So my shop is a disaster because I have a lot of stuff going on at the same time. Okay, so I'm just going to tie this up out of the way, like this. Trim my end. Throw that out. By the way, in case you care, it is an E12 Torx. Okay, let's bolt it in. I think this one is set up where I can get the fronts in. Now there's these pegs in the rails that go into these holes. You gotta line the pegs up first. Like that. She just pops right in. Okay, so I'm not gonna be able to get to either, so I'm gonna hook up battery because I've got the connections hooked up. So see what happens. I haven't caught on fire yet. Assuming I did this properly, these should work. Holy smokes, we got power. Alright. Fronts first. So, what I like to do with stuff like this is get them started first, and then switch to the other side. That way, I know they're going to fit. See, it's me a little bit of a cleanup, boy. I like it. Okay. There we go. 1, 2. One, 2. So listen, there's probably a torque spec for these. And one should always look up torque specs. Everything they do. That said, I'm going to go with tight. Broken. Okay, fix that later. Need something to fix in a used car. Okay, back in. These are in the front. Back again. may notice a lot that I don't like to use power tools all the time. So sometimes I just do things the hard way. Okay, so we slide these covers on. There you go. Job done. So, do they bolt in? Yes. Do they work with power? Yes. So this is a direct bolt-on application, which is awesome.
So there you have it, sports seats in the 997. To me, they do really transform the look of the car, makes it a little bit more sporty. More supports at the top, and then you've got the additional lumbar supports and everything on the side, full power, heated. Anyway, really happy with these. For anyone else, they're a direct bolt-on plug and play.
Hey, welcome back. Now that we have the LS Swap Porsche up and running, I wanted to do a video sharing my top 10 lessons learned and cover all the costs on the project. I'm going to include chapters in this video, so if you want to skip ahead to anything or come back and review certain pieces in your swap journey, that maybe helps you out. As always, please like and subscribe, as it does really help us out. So let's get started. Lesson number 1. Do consider an LS3 crate engine. We went with a used L76 out of a 2009 Pontiac G8, which is basically an LS2 with LS3 heads. Mainly this was a choice to save a bit of money on a crate engine, and it did help build some content for the channel, as we did do a refresh on the motor and installed displacement on demand deletion, as well as a few upgrades like a camshaft. However, we also learned that for the swap to work, we needed LS3 accessories, like the starter, oil pressure sensor, AC compressor, and the water pump. So we weren't able to use any of those parts that came with the L76. After all the work and the accessories changed, we maybe saved a couple $1,000 in the end. I'm going to say it's more, in most cases, it would be more cost effective buying the crate engine in the long term. When this engine does go, I'll be going with an LS3 crate motor. Lesson number 2, transmission relocation. So CPE and many others are installing the LS by shifting the transmission back or forward to the car about 1.5 inches. In all, I'd say this is required, and you need to factor this into the plan so you can fabricate the brackets at the right time, ideally when the engine and transmission are actually out of the car. We didn't expect this and had to figure out a strategy with everything in the car. I'll likely buy a used bracket and fabricate a better solution in the winter than how we did it. Again, things are just easier to do right in the first place when it's actually out of the car, but it is what it is, so learn from that lesson. Lesson number 3, keep the battery cable from the transmission to the Porsche motor. We were told we didn't need anything from the Porsche motor beyond the harness plugs, but that's not entirely true. You need to run a connection from the battery cable that mounts on the passenger side of the transmission to the alternator on the LS engine, and then from there to the starter. As mine, the Porsche one, ended up leaving with the motor, I didn't have it, so I had to fabricate one. Save yourself some time, keep your battery cable. Lesson number 4, keep your radiator hoses and your hard heater lines. We did our coolant lines a little bit different, and we're able to actually use the Porsche connections on each side. So another thing to take off your Porsche motor is those rad hoses. They're on the passenger side and the driver's side. You do need to cup them to make them fit, but you want to keep them. Also, keep the hard lines that connect to the heater lines underneath the car and run up into the engine bay. I don't like how we actually ran our heater lines, and I did a video on it, but I'm going to do a follow-up when we change it. And there's little to no information on how the best way is to run them. So in the winter, we're going to run them different. I'm going to design some holders, and I'm going to cover all the ways that we actually tackle that in the winter. So that's a video to come of how we make some changes there. But for now, just make sure you keep your hard lines so you've got those options. Lesson number 5. Install the power steering pump in the place of the carbon canister. There are a lot of ways to do anything, but we wanted to make sure something looked as stock as possible. That's just how we like to kind of do stuff. There's many ways the power steering pump is installed in the front trunk that you'll find online, but it usually takes up space, and I actually kind of thought it looks terrible. So one way we saw in the Swap Porsche Facebook community looked a lot more stock, but it did require the removal of the carbon canister in the front. It's not a required thing to have, and the GM computer doesn't care that it's missing, so we went ahead and did it. However, the supplied lines are too short from CPE, and you'll need to get a 4-foot long pressure line and more return line hose to install it there. We got our pressure line from eBay, and it was one for a nitrous setup. I'll be doing another video covering how we did some of the installation there, so you can do it the same way or find your own way. Lesson 6. Removal of the LS power steering pump. When you remove the power steering pump from an LS, you can remove the idler pulley that's down low where the alternator goes. Then you can run a 52.5-inch belt, and the part numbers that we found were Dayco 5060525 and Continental 4060525. We went ahead with the Continental belt because it was more available locally. Doesn't really matter which one you go for. I'll leave the information in the description. Lesson 8, heat shields on the exhaust manifolds. After we had it all installed, we found out that the BBK short headers that everyone was using and CPE was supplying were causing heat problems that could melt the expansion tank. Now, on a side note, you should always look to replace the expansion tank and the cap anyways when the engine's out, because they are always known to go in a Porsche. 996s are 997s. Anyways, we had to do a heat shield wrap on the driver's side with the motor in the car, which you're not always going to get the best quality job. It's easier when it's out. So make your life easier, do the heat wrap on the exhaust manifolds while you have it out of the car. I've since heard CPE is going back to stock GM manifolds with factory heat shields, so that could be an option as well, and just dodge the BBK thing at all. Lesson 9, power steering O-rings. So there are no instructions, and this may be obvious to people that work on Porsches all the time, but I missed it. On the power steering fittings, there are 3 O-rings. The return line has a rubber one, and the pressure line has a plastic one and a rubber one. On the pressure line, the rubber one faces the rack, then the plastic one behind it, which is towards the brakes. You need to either buy a new set or reuse a set on your old lines. They are not included in the kit. Luckily, I kept my lines around and we ended up reusing them. It did work fine, and after, of course, finding a leak when I didn't have O-rings, we put it, but I wish we just put them in the first time. But anyways, that's what fixed it. Lesson 10, know your water pump. As I said, you need to use an LS3 water pump, but not all pumps are the same. I've included a link in the description to a site that breaks down all the pumps and spacing to make sure you get the right one. I've also included the part number on the pump we used that worked. Apparently anybody who has a crate motor LS3 will have the right one. But again, you get the part number in the description. Now let's get to the brass taxes and talk about money. I tracked every dime on this project, and I want to first let you know about 2 things. First, I did a lot of upgrades and while you were in there type projects that I won't cover here as they were optional and just choices I made. For example, we installed sport seats, a different stereo, shifter, refinished the wheels, yada yada yada. So I'm not going to cover those in my cost. Second, I'm located in Canada, so I'm going to give a price breakdown in Canadian dollars, and I'll convert that to US dollars with an exchange rate of 1.32, as that was about the average exchange rate during the whole project time of 2 months. So on to costs. Let's start with the car itself. I bought the car, which is a 2008 Porsche 997 Carrera S with a known blown motor for $16,500. All in, taxes, registration done. Next, I'm going to cover the engine parts. I went with a used L76 from a 2009 Pontiac G8, which is an LS2 that has LS3 heads. It did have displacement on demand, and I need to delete that. So the total for the engine, parts, and headers was $11,250. To compare that to an LS is a bit difficult, as some of those parts would also be needed for the LS3 crate motor, such as AC components. That said, after taxes, a crate motor plus some bits would be about $14,000. So I did save a bit, but as for one of my lessons, if you can, I just buy the crate motor. Now let's talk about pure swap parts from CPE. I'm going to talk about the mounting kits, induction kits, flywheel, clutch, and a few small bits you need to buy. That came out to about $16,000 plus $1,500 I had to pay in taxes. So that's $17,500. Getting close to the end are the finishing things like exhaust, which came out to about $2,000. Lastly, you're going to have to do a tune and AC recharge, which will depend on where you go, but I'm going to list it at about $750 for budgeting purposes. Okay, so what's the damage? A whopping $48,000 Canadian. After all is said and done. Or with a US dollar exchange rate of 1.32, about $32,640 US. This is not a cheap project by any means. I'd even go so far as to say some may think it's not worth it. But let's look into that logic a little bit. First, my car had a blown engine already, and it was so bad that it couldn't be rebuilt. There was parts everywhere. Therefore, I had 2 choices. Find a used motor, which may have issues, but would have been around $25,000. But you need to do a lot of checking on the motor to make sure, and still do upgrades to the IMS, etc. to be more safe. But it's still a $30,000 gamble if you end up with bore scoring. Second option would be to buy an engine with all the upgrades done, IMS, cylinder linings, etc. But those quotes came in at $45,000. Either way, lucky on the used or a total rebuild, you would be more money in the car than it's worth and have expensive ongoing maintenance. But if you're staying pure Porsche, I totally get it. Now, when compared to the LS, even the 6.0 LS2 and especially the 6.2 LS3, you're getting a lighter weight motor, more horsepower, and more torque. You're also getting a lower cost of maintenance and a very reliable motor. For example, there are Corvettes out there with LS2s on factory parts, just standard maintenance alone, doing over 250,000 miles. Also, now that the Porsche is swapped, availability of motors in the future are abundant with tons of options. For me, I really love the 997. I think it's one of the best design Porsches that came out, and was building the car for me to plan to keep for a long time. This is why I did a bunch of upgrades outside of what the standard swap was along the way. So when I look at the cost of the project, that long-term maintenance and reliability were a big factor. The horsepower and the torque increase to me was a bonus. And also, it was great to work on a Porsche again. It was a really fun project to work along the way. There are already things I want to do better in the winter, and that's fine. I'm still glad I did it, and once I get it all dialed in, it will be one of my favorite cars I own, and the one I look forward to keeping for a very long time. I hope this helps in your project decisions though. Thanks for following along, and I hope you continue to do so as we shift back to our 32 Ford Roadster project. Drive safe, and I'll see you in the next one. So that's it. That's the end of the project. We got it running. Huge shout out to a few people first off before we get into this video. Chavez Performance Engineering, they supplied everything for the swap kit, did a video on them, talked about how I was comparing them with Renegade, why I went with them, so check that out. The salvage guys, they provided the L76 engine that went into this project, so a huge shout out to them for hooking us up for that. And then the Shenanigans Speed Shop, they helped us out with the tune and got some killer numbers on it. Anyways, before I get into that, all the links to them are going to be in the description below. So if you are in the British Columbia area, do check them out. But they do ship worldwide for the salvage guys if you need any parts for Porsches or Ferraris or whatever. They deal in lots of stuff. And of course, check out Chavez for everything on the swap side of things. Or he can actually do the build for you. So cool guy to check out as well. Really helpful. Anyways, let's get into some of the final stuff. Of course, the project's done. I'm going to put in quotes, projects are really never done, but there are a few things that I do want to improve in the winter, and I'll get into that too. So, final numbers on the tune came out way above what I expected. I was hoping for maybe high 300s in terms of horsepower and torque. I was able to get 492 horsepower and 422 foot-pounds of torque on the tune. Crazy. Really speaks to the tuner at Shenanigans. Did an amazing job. It is a stock L76 out of a Pontiac G8, which we did the displacement on demand delete. Did some videos on that with the review on the engine. It has a performance cam in it, GM performance cam, double lifter springs, double valve springs. And that's pretty much about it. The rest of it's pretty much bone stock. I did a refresh on it, cleaned up the heads, cleaned up all the carbon off, all the pistons and stuff, but crazy numbers. That was actually on a dyno, so that's not engine numbers, that's wheel numbers. So that was really cool. The car is completely insane to drive. I'm actually going to take some time to get used to it. Just to give you some perspective, a turbo in the same generation in 2008 put out 480 horsepower and 460 foot-pounds of torque. So I'm 12 horsepower above a stock turbo and 38 foot-pounds of torque under a stock turbo. So, or sorry, yeah, that's right. So yeah, I mean that's pretty crazy to have in a C2. In terms of my thoughts on the project, I bought this car with a blown motor, and the engine was completely garbage. So obviously, I couldn't rebuild it. The cost of a totally rebuilt motor or another used motor is really high on these Porsches, obviously. Then you have the ongoing maintenance. So an LS swap, in my view, made a lot of sense. If you were just trying to do upgrades on the stock 3.8, say supercharger or turbo or something like that, to get these kind of horsepower numbers, I don't think you'd get there. And if you did, you'd probably blow the motor pretty quick. So if you were just to look at it from a pure horsepower, torque perspective in terms of an upgrade, like for like, leaps and bounds going this way makes a lot of sense. Long-term reliability, the LS motors are extremely reliable, parts are easy to get, and they're way cheaper than the Porsche. The engine is lighter, so I mean, yeah, it's just a complete no-brainer. So I'm really glad I did it. There was some frustrating moments. I did share some of those with the video, some things that I went through, but I'm glad I stuck with it at the end. In terms of what I want to do in the wintertime, just to maybe, if you're going to take this project on, I'll do some videos of it when I do it, so if you do take the project on, you can go a different way. I am trying to retain the stock deck lid with the power spoiler. I like the kind of cleaner look of just having a power spoiler. But there is a lot of clearance issues. There's issues with how you have to do the air intake, and then getting all the mechanisms to actually clear. So there's some engineering I have to do there. This is actually a spare deck lid. I got this off the salvage guys as well. I had to cut some holes in the bottom to clear the air intake that comes from Chavis. And then I designed and printed some mounts to hold the wing up basically fixed. In the winter, I plan on getting a ducktail insert. It actually goes in here. It's a bolt-in style, so I can open up the air intake more. I can design it more of an air intake box, kind of like more of the old school kind of 80s or 90s turbos. I guess 80s turbos. So it's got a big air cleaner up top to suck cold air in. But that's my plan. I still have the original deck lid and spoiler that came off this car that's untouched. So I'm going to use this spare one as some engineering, kind of figure out if I can make it all work. And then I can use the original deck lid to get the power functionality back if I want to go back to a stock locomotive. Anyway, that's for the winter. Other thing I'm going to do is the heater hoses. So the heater hoses go for quite a long line. Most people run them from the Porsche connections over top of the engine and then into the LS setup. I did mine where I came up the passenger side and then went across the rear bumper and then into the LS water pump using AN fittings. So I took the press fit fittings out of the stock water pump and then I put in threaded AN fittings and then I ran a 180 and a 90. It works, but I don't like to have that much rubber hose and connections. Just prone to failure. You can get hose clamps get loose, everything else. So I'm actually going to go hard lines. Still the same routing, but I'm going to route hard line across the bumper, rubber, and then hard line all the way down, and then rubber connecting to the original lines. And there's a few mount points I want to put it so it's not flopping around or anything. So I want to change that. The headers on here, the BBK headers, they're known to put out a lot of heat. I did put some heat wrap in there as best I could with the engine in the car. It did help us with the intake air temperatures and everything we were seeing, so it seems fine. I had to get ceramic plug wires because of the heat, but I do want to drop the engine out again, properly wrap the headers with heat wrap, titanium heat wrap, and then put some offset aluminum heat shields on there just to really maximize the heat reduction that I'm getting in the engine bay. So that's quite a bit of work. I'll probably end up doing the transmission mount. I did a slotted style. It works, doesn't look that great. I think I could do a weld-in kind of situation where it would look a lot better. Admittedly, I was in a bit of a rush to kind of get the car done so I could get some miles on it before the season was over. We're now getting into mid-September, so I'll be lucky to get a few miles on it before the weather changes and I got to put it away. So I achieved that goal, but there are a few things I didn't like, so that's one thing. So I'm going to get another bracket and then I'll cut weld it, make it look really good, and then put that back in. Since the engine's coming out anyway, do the heat wrap. I'm going to change the exhaust. You'll probably see in the video the tips I went with the clearances and the mufflers and everything I had. I've done vibrant resonators to vibrant mufflers after an X-pipe that goes underneath the oil pan. I did put a lot of heat shielding on the X-pipe. I'm not seeing any high oil temperatures, so I think we're good, but I'm actually going to get the stock mufflers back with the stock tips. I don't like how far these tips stick out. They look nice, but on this car, I want more flush like the stock one. I'm going to go with vibrant resonators straight off of the headers, likely to an X-pipe closer towards the back instead of underneath the engine this time, and then connecting it to the factory mufflers with braces that are coming off the engine to hold the mufflers in place. So it will get more stock. These tips and that muffler, I've got other projects I'm thinking about using that on, so it's all good. I'll reuse this stuff. So that's one of the other projects I want to do. Yeah, I think that's most of the major projects I want to actually take on. There's probably going to be more things I got to clean up as I kind of work the bugs out. But yeah, I just wanted to do a little bit of a wrap-up video. Apologies, there's not more of like a whole bunch of driving and putting it through the gears. I was doing a bit of the filming, but it didn't really turn out. And to be honest, it was my first drive with it, and I really wanted to pay attention to how the car operated until I get used to it. I can tell you it pulls like crazy. The numbers I was getting on the dyno, those 492, is at about 6,300 RPM. It had a really flat, nice torque band, everywhere from like 3,800 to 4,000 up into like 5,800. So when you're going through gears, it absolutely launches. So I was really trying to pay attention to it versus filming. But I did get a mount and everything for it, so I will do some more driving videos before the season's done. I'll post some updates and along with the project we're working on. Other than that, I think it's been a great build. You know, I did a lot of other stuff outside doing the swap. You know, I got the wheels redone and more of a retro styling. Changed out the sports seats. I did the Android touchscreen stereo unit to update it so I can get CarPlay and everything in there. Did the third radiator in the front just to add some more cooling to it, and just some other general maintenance kind of stuff while I was in there. Sway bar linkages and stuff in the back were worn, so I did those. Stuff like that. Anyways, like I said, just to wrap up, hope you enjoyed following the project. I will probably, like, again, post another kind of project of showing the nice little things I want to do in the winter, and then it's on back to the 32, get that up and running. It's actually ready to turn and fire up. I just didn't do it as I stopped to do the Porsche project. So we'll probably be switching gears into a different playlist around the 32. And then I start getting in the bodywork and stuff in the wintertime. But anyways, that's it. That's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed it. Just like, subscribe, do all those things. It really helps. Add any comments. If you start to do a swap, you have any questions, just hit me up. I'll help you along the way. Anyways, happy driving. Stay safe. Take care.